Hello and welcome back to Friends of Tracking, a set of video tutorials on using data to analyze the game of football. My name is Laurie and this is the fourth installment of a set of videos focusing specifically on the applications of tracking data. In the first video, we looked at some of the basics of working with tracking data in Python, in particular using it to help us analyze major events during matches in a lot more detail. In part two, we moved on to looking at the physical performance of players, how to measure player velocities, the distance they cover at different speeds, and we analyzed some player sprints. In part three, moved on to some more advanced metrics, and we introduced the concept of pitch control, which essentially allows you to quantify the probability that either team would retain or gain possession of the ball if it is moved to any particular location on the pitch. And this enabled us to begin to evaluate the passing options that are available at any given instant to the player on the ball. Today, we're going to take this one step further and look at how you can place a value on player actions. As ever, all the code can be found in the Friends of Tracking GitHub repository at this link here. And the tracking data set that Metrical Sports have very kindly made publicly available can be found in their repository in the second link. So here I've plotted the pitch control field from an instant of one of the games. The dots show the positions of the players, and the arrows indicate the speed and direction that they were running in at this moment of time. The ball is here with this player here, and the black arrow indicates the pass that this player is about to make. The background colors show you the pitch control field, and regions shaded red are controlled by the red team. So if the ball had been played there, they would be very likely to gain control of it. And the blue regions show you the areas that are controlled by the blue team and effectively show you what passing options are available to the player on the ball. So pitch control can show you all the options available to the player of the ball in terms of keeping possession, but it doesn't tell you anything about the value of these options. As far as pitch control is concerned, the pass that this player here makes out to the left is just as good as just passing it back to the goalkeeper. In both cases, they're very likely to retain possession. So if you want to be able to identify the best passing options, those options that are likely to improve the position of the team and increase their probability of scoring a goal in this possession, we need to add something else to the model. So in order to quantify player actions or player options, analysts have developed the concept of expected possession value, or EPV. And EPV is essentially designed to quantify the value of possessing the ball at any given instant of the game. But what do we mean by the value of a situation? So value in this context is defined as being the probability that the team will go on from the current instant to score a goal at the end of the possession. Or writing this down sort of mathematically, the probability that the possession will end in the goal conditioned on the situation right now. And we can break situation down into a number of different factors. So first of all, you have where is the ball on the field? What is the position and velocity of all the players in the team that's in possession? What's the position and the velocity of all the opponents? And then some additional sort of match state factors, such as are we currently in open play, or is it a set piece? What is the score line, and how much time is left in the game? So you can see that there are many different factors and variables that we'd have to take into account of to calculate expected possession value in a given situation. And the state of the art in terms of published work is Javier Fernandez's paper that was presented at the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference in 2019, titled Decomposing the Immeasurable Sport, a Deep Learning EPV Framework for Soccer. And in this paper, it's, to my knowledge, the only published work that really tries to take into account all these factors. So today I'm going to introduce a much simpler possession value model that is based almost entirely on just the position of the ball, as well as a few other factors to account for things like set pieces. So in this model, the probability of a possession developing into a goal is really just dependent on the ball position and doesn't take into account the positions of the players at all. But what we're going to do later on is combine this simple model with pitch control to add some of that context back in when assessing passing options for a player on the ball. But this model doesn't require any tracking data itself. It can be developed and calibrated entirely using event data. To my knowledge, the first EPV model was developed by Sarah Rudd, which she presented at the NESIS conference in 2011. And since then, several others have built on this work and developed and added more context to it, such as the VAPE model that was developed by the people at Sci Sports. And I would strongly recommend you watch the video tutorials that have been made by Lotte Branson that explain how this model works and how to use it. You also have goals added, or G+, a model developed by the guys at American Soccer Analysis, and then other models such as expected threat. The original EPV model considers possessions as being sequences of states, with potential future states being dependent only on the current state that you're in right now and not what happened previously. And this is something known as a Markov process. And by states, I mean zones on the field. So we can break down a football pitch into sort of zones. Like here is just a simple grid, and say that when the ball is in one of these zones, that corresponds to a state. And if the ball moves to a different cell, that's a change in state. But states can also be a set piece. So when there's a corner, that's one state, or a penalty, that's another state. And then there are two possession ending states. One is a team scores a goal and the possession ends, and the other is the team loses possession, either by knocking it out of play or by ceding possession to the other team. And so the core of the model really is to calculate the probability of moving from the current state into any of the others. Or to put this another way, given the current position of the ball, what is the probability that the ball is successfully moved, either through a pass or a dribble, to any other location on the field or any other grid cell, that a set piece is awarded, or that a goal is scored or possession is lost. And obviously, in both those last two cases, the possession sequence ends. And all this information is captured in something called the transition matrix, which tells you the probability of moving from one state into any of the others. And so in the transition matrix, you have this big 2D matrix where the columns define the current state. So you have state one, that could be one of the zones, all the way to, however many states you have. So state N could be, there's a penalty. And then you have a goal and the loss, the two possession ending states. And then each row tells you the probability of moving from your current state into one of the other states. So for example, this element here tells you the probability of moving directly from state one to state two. Here you have the probability of moving directly from state one to a goal, or state one to a loss of possession, and so on. And as I said, these last two columns are special because they're the possession ending states. So a goal always remains a goal, and a loss of possession is always is a loss of possession and the end of the sequence. And so using a large sample of event data, you can essentially begin to fill in this transition matrix. And once you've measured the transition matrix, you can use it to calculate the probability that a possession will end in a goal given whatever state you currently find yourself in. So, for example, if S is the current state at time t, you can calculate the probability of finding yourself in any of the other states after the next event by multiplying S by the transition matrix. You can calculate the probability of finding yourself in any state in 2 events time by multiplying S by the transition matrix twice, and then so on, such that if you want to calculate the probability of finding yourself in any state at any point in the future, you just have to continue multiplying S by the transition matrix. But because all possessions must end in either a goal or a loss of possession, if you look far enough in the future, what you find is that the probability of finding yourself in any other state is 0, except for a goal or a loss of possession. And so what this is telling you is the probability that a possession will end in a goal or a loss of possession given whatever current state you're in here. For example, in state 1, the probability the possession will end in a goal is 0.2, and the probability that you'll just lose possession is 0.8. And so once you've measured the transition matrix, you essentially have the EPV model, because you can then calculate the value of being in any particular state, quantified by the probability that the possession from that state will develop into a goal. It takes quite a lot of data to measure an EPV model, at least 1 season's worth of event data. So what I'm going to do now is show you the results of a model that I generated earlier, and then we'll move on to look at what you can do by combining EPV models with pitch control models to investigate the passing options that a player on the ball has. So if you go to this link here, you'll be able to find an interactive chart that shows you some of the results of this EPV model. So if we click on the link, this chart shows you the value of possessing the ball at any given area of the pitch. It assumes that the team is in possession is shooting from left to right. The colors indicate the EPV value. So as you move your cursor around the pitch, it tells you the specific possession value, so the probability that a possession will end with a goal given that the ball is at this current location. So for this grid cell here, it's 2%. So there's a 2% probability you'll score a goal given that you have the ball in this position here. And obviously, as you go closer to your opponent's goal, the EPV value increases. I've also included some additional information that tells you the probability that a team will attempt to pass or dribble or to shoot from the current location, as well as the probability that possession is lost from this location in the field. But what you'll see is that, as you move back towards your own goal, the EPV value goes down, such that in the middle of your own half, the probability that a possession will result in a goal becomes about 1%. And the lowest it gets to is about 0.5%. You can also change the chart to show regular expected goals instead. So now this tells you the probability that you will score a goal if you shoot from any given area of the field. So within your own half, it's essentially 0, and it increases quite rapidly as you go towards the opponent's goal. And you can switch between shooting with the head and shooting with the foot. So you can see that unlike XG, which just calculates the probability of scoring a goal if you shoot from any given location, and so for most of the field it's 0, EPV calculates the probability that the possession will develop into a goal from a given location of the field. And so that's why you get non-zero values right across the field. In an expected possession value model, the value of a pass is simply the difference in the EPV value from the start location to the end location of the pass. So for example, if a player passes the ball from this location here with an EP value of a little over 1% to this location here with an EP value of about 8%, the value added of the pass is 7%, so 8% minus 1%. And so the EPV model now gives you the ability to start to place a value in terms of a goal scoring probability on every action a player takes in possession of the ball, rather than just shots. So just to reiterate, the value added of a completed action between two states is just the difference between the EPV values of the two states. So for example, if a player passes the ball from position Ri to final position Rf, the value added is the EPV value at Rf minus the EPV value at Ri. But what about when the player in possession of the ball is surveying the passing options and wants to pick the best option? How do we put an expected value on each of those options? In this case, the player has the ball at Ri and is looking at a passing option at position Rf. We can calculate this expected value of a possession at Rf as being the pitch control value at that position multiplied by the EPV value at that position. Or to put that another way, the probability of the pass being successful multiplied by the value of the possession at the final location. And we can compare this to the expected value of the possession at the current ball location by calculating the pitch control at the current location before the pass is made, multiplied by the EPV value at the current pass location. And so what this is saying is that the current value of the possession is not solely the EPV value, it's the EPV value multiplied by the degree of pitch control at the current location. The player is not guaranteed to retain possession if he or she decides not to make a pass. Finally, the expected value added of the passing option is the product of the pitch control at the target location and the EPV value at the target location minus the pitch control at the current location multiplied by the EPV value at the current location. And so the nice thing about calculating value added this way is that a passing option can have a positive expected value added, even if the ball is passed back towards your own goal, if it means the team is much more likely to retain possession. Okay, so now let's go back into Python and look at some of the results that we get when we combine the EPV model with the pitch control model. As ever, all the code can be found in the Friends of Tracking GitHub repository, and I've made a few changes to some of the existing code, which I'll go through in a second, as well as adding an extra module and, of course, the script for this tutorial. I've also included in the repository a file that gives the results of an EPV model so that you can read it in and use it yourselves. So let's start by reading in some of the relevant modules. You'll see that there's a new module, Metrica EPV. We'll come to that in a second. So we'll import those. And as before, let's read in the data for sample game number 2 in the Metrica dataset. So I'm going to read in the events and the home and away team tracking data frames. So let me do that. We'll then convert the positions from Metrica coordinates into meters, and also switch the playing direction in the second half so that teams are always shooting in the same direction throughout the match. And finally, we're also going to calculate the player velocities, which of course is a necessary component of the pitch control model. So let's run all this. So before we get on to results for the EPV model, I just want to highlight a couple of changes that I've made to the pitch control model. The first is I've included a function that calculates whether a player is offside. And if the player is flagged as being offside, they're not included in the pitch control calculation. So you'll see this new function has appeared called check offsides. And this is the function that calculates and then removes players that are offside. And if you go down to the generate pitch control for event function, you'll see that there's a new input to that, which by default is set to true, which means that players are offside or removed, but you can also turn it off as well if you should want to. In order for that to work, you need to know which players are the goalkeepers. So you'll see there's a new input, GK numbers, which is a tuple that gives the jersey number of the home team goalkeeper and the away team goalkeeper. And that is calculated using a function in the Metrica IO module. So if I run this line of code here, and what that gave us, you'll see that the home team goalkeeper is player number 11 and the away team goalkeeper is player number 25. And that's going to be passed into the pitch control model later on. So while we're setting up things, let's also read in the parameters required for the pitch control model. Let's run that. We covered that in the last tutorial. One of the additional things that we need to know is which direction each team is attacking in, just so that we can make sure that the EPV model is flipped in the right direction for a team that's shooting from right to left. So there's also a new function in Metrica IO called find playing direction. So let me just run this for the home team, and we'll see that the home attack direction is, in this case, -1. So they're shooting from right to left. Finally, let's read in the EPV grid from the Metrica EPV module. And so this grid I've saved in the repository. So let's see what it looks like. There's a little visualization tool for plotting the EPV grid. And here it is. And so it looks very similar to the one that we looked at in the interactive chart. The direction is flipped because we're looking at the home team, as the home team is shooting from right to left. If you move your cursor around on the screen, you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner the EPV value at any given area of the field. So again, this now tells you the probability that a possession will end in a goal, given that the ball is currently located in whatever area of the field. And so that is saved as a CSV file called EPV_grid in the home directory. So in the last tutorial, we looked at pitch control in the lead up to the first goal scored by the away team. So let's look at that again in terms of the value of passing options. So the first thing I'll do is just plot the 3 events that led up to that goal. So we have a pass from player 21 to player 19, who then passed to player 23, ran into the penalty area, passed to player 24, who scored a goal. So let's look specifically at the passing options that player 23 had at the moment that he made this pass. And we can do that by running these lines of code here. So first of all, the event number is 822. The next line of code here calculates the EPV added for that particular pass, so for the assist. And that's run using a function that's included in the Metrica EPV module called calculate EPV added. So let's take a quick look at that. And so essentially what this does is it calculates the pitch control at the start location of the pass and then the target location of the pass. It finds the EPV value at the start location and the target location. It calculates the expected EPV by multiplying pitch control by EPV at the target location, does the same thing for the start location, and subtracts the two, as we saw before. So let's go back to the tutorial. And so the next thing I'm going to do is also calculate the full pitch control surface at the instant that pass was made, and multiply this by the EPV surface at that instant as well. And that's performed using the plot EPV for event function in the Metrica Viz module. So that's a new function that I've added. So what this will show is all the passing options, or the value of all the passing options that the player had when he made that pass. So let's run these lines of codes and you'll see what it comes up with. It takes a few seconds to run because it's calculating the pitch control surface. And so here is the pitch control at that instant. So of course, red regions are regions controlled by the red team, and blue regions regions controlled by the blue team. You can see the pass that player 23 made to player 24. It was to an area that was colored blue, so it was possession was likely to be won by player 24. But the EPV value, sorry, the pitch control value is 0.63. That's location. But of course, this doesn't tell you what the value of the pass was, and looking at this, there are potential passing options back to player 20 and to player 22 as well. What we really want to know is what were the best passing options in terms of the value added, or the increase in probability that the team would score. And so that is given by the product of pitch control and EPV. So most of the pitch is the same color, white, except for this sort of dark smudge around here. The darker the color indicates the higher value the region, or the higher the expected value would be if the ball was passed there. And again, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see the actual value of, or the actual expected value of any given position. So in this case, player 23 pretty much picked the best passing option, which was clearly a pass to player 24 and a great scoring opportunity. The actual expected EPV added for this pass is about 0.05, which turns out to be pretty high. Everywhere else has a pretty small expected EPV, either because it's away from the opponent's goal or because the probability of retaining possession is pretty low. So now let's look at a few further examples. So if we go back to the tutorial script, what we're going to do now is calculate what the expected value added of all the passes that the home and the away team made, and we'll take a look at a few examples. And so the first thing we're going to do is identify all the home and away team shots and passes from the event data. So I can run that. And now we're going to calculate the EPV added for all the home team passes by iterating through the data frame that holds the home passes, and do the same thing for the away team. And this works just by calling this calculate EPV added function that's in the Metrica EPV module. So let's run these lines of code. So these are all stored in a list for either team. So let's sort those lists in descending order of expected EPV added. And let's just take a look at the top 5 passes for the home team. So these are the events, here's the EPV added, and this is just the raw difference in EPV between the target and the start location, ignoring the pitch control component. So of course it's much higher. If you compare this to the just to the home shots, pretty much all these passes are assists to a shooting opportunity. So now let's look at the highest value passes that the away team made. So let's look at the top 5 passes in expected EPV. Oops. So again, pretty much all these passes were assists, either to a shot that was saved or blocked or off target, or to one of the goals that the away team scored. The highest value pass, or in terms of expected EPV, was pass event number 1663. So let's plot the EPV, expected EPV added surface for that pass. Okay, so first of all, here's the pitch control again. So player 18 has the ball and passes it right across goal to player 24, who's pretty much unmarked coming in at the far post. So let's look at the expected EPV surface. And you can see, this then highlights the best passing options that player 18 had, which was to cut the ball back to player 20, who is unmarked at the edge of the area, to try and play the ball right across goal to the two players who are making a run in towards the near post, or to make this pass to the far post. The expected EPV added for the pass that the player 18 did actually make is 0.07, and it would have been actually quite a lot higher if he passed in through here. Of course, one of the omissions in this model is interceptions. Pitch control doesn't take into account interceptions, and so potentially a pass across the face of goal wasn't really on for player 18 at this instant. Now, I've included a couple of other examples here just to demonstrate some features of expected EPV. In this example, I'm going to demonstrate that you can have a positive expected value for a pass, even though the pass is away from the opponent's goal. And that's because, of course, there's this extra component of whether possession is retained or not. So this is event 195. Let's just run these lines of code and look at what the EPV surfaces look like. So again, starting with the pitch control surface, player 9 has the ball in the opponent's penalty area. You can see that it's surrounded by 3 blue team players here, and player 16 and player 15 are converging on him, so that the pitch control at the actual location of player 9 is pretty low. Clearly, if he doesn't make a pass, it's very likely to move the ball. And so what he does is makes this pass away from goal to player 8. And it turns out this pass has a positive EPV value, simply because if player 9 chooses not to make a pass, is quite likely to lose possession of the ball. So, even though he's passing away from goal, he's passing to an area that's controlled by the red team, they retain possession, and so this pass has a positive value, which is the way that you would want this to work. Back in the script, there's these lines of code here that I've commented out just because they take quite a while to run. But what they do is go through all the home team passes in this case and calculates the expected EPV added of the pass as before, but also looks for the maximum expected EPV option at that instant as well, essentially by searching across that surface and finding the highest value location, and then records all these things in a list. And so what it enables us to do is go through and find instances where there was a much better passing option available. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. I'll leave you to run this at home. As I said, it takes quite some time to run. So in this first example, we're going to look at a pass into the opponent's penalty area by the home team. We're going to highlight that it wasn't the best passing option to make. One piece of functionality I would point out is that there's an input to the plot EPV for event function that allows you to plot contours as well. And what this does is it marks regions that are within 75% of the highest expected EPV value at that instant. So let's just run this code and you'll see what it looks like. This is event number 1680. Okay, so this is the expected EPV surface. Player 1 has the ball, plays into the penalty area to player 9. And so this pass, looks like it has a positive expected EPV value if you just compare the values of these two locations. But the best value location to pass it into is around here, particularly into the area that player 5 is running into. This is partly because, of course, that this region is just simply closer to the opponent's goal. And you could argue that it's a little too close to the goalkeeper. But then again, player 5 is moving very rapidly in towards this area, and so would have a decent chance of getting his head on the ball should it be crossed in there. And if you do this for many of the different passes, what you find is there's one particular situation that arises quite often, which is quite interesting to look at. So what I'm going to do now, just to finish off, is plot 3 examples of this situation. So it's going to produce 3 expected EPV surfaces. So in this example, player 1 on the red team has the ball and plays it back to player 8, fairly safe pass. But the best option in terms of the highest expected EPV was a crossfield pass out to player 7, who's all alone on the left wing and has, clearly controls a lot of the space, and some of this space is relatively high value. Here's another example. In this case, player 5 passes up to player 9. But again, there's acres of space open on the left side. Player 8 is pretty close to the touchline, and is very likely to regain control in, again, what is certainly a higher value position than that player 9 is. So again, it's saying the best pass is a crossfield pass out to this wing. Of course, here's yet another option. Player 5 plays the ball. Actually, I think this has a negative ETB value because it's into a very contested area. But the pass out to player 8 is open. And you can see many other examples in the data where the best passing option is a long crossfield pass, or sometimes a long pass from defense out to one of the wings. And of course, when you see these types of passes, you think of one team in particular, which is Liverpool, who seem to play a lot of these crossfield passes. So the goal of this tutorial was to demonstrate that you can combine a pitch control model with a very simple expected possession value model and a degree of hand waving in order to put together a framework for assessing player passing options and valuing their decision making and the actions that they took. Of course, there are many ways in which these tools can be developed and improved. I described a very simple EPV model, and there's certainly more sophisticated versions out there. And I would refer you to the VAPE model that's described in forensic tracking videos that have been presented by Lottie Branson. And also the G+ or goals added model that has been developed by the people at American Soccer Analysis. And both these models include far more context than the one that I described today. So they include or account for things like counterattacks or through balls, much more information about the specific context rather than just where was the ball on the field. Another element that I've mentioned a couple of times in this video is that the pitch control model doesn't account for interceptions. It's based entirely on probability of players being able to control the ball at the target location. But Will Spearman has a really great paper from 2017 at the Sloan Conference that describes a model for incorporating the probability of the ball be intercepted along the path to the target location. Incorporating that into the pitch control model would be a significant improvement. Another significant improvement that could be made is to further develop the pitch control model to really account for the probability that a player in possession of the ball could be tackled. So the version of the pitch control model that I've been using wasn't really calibrated to consider the probability the player be tackled. It was designed more to look at pass success. Of course, we can also value defensive actions or other defensive actions, such as interceptions and clearances. And of course, another element that can be included is to model dribbling or carrying the ball in more detail. This all provides a roadmap for developing quite a sophisticated framework for valuing player actions and decision making, which could be potentially a very valuable tool for data-driven scouting and player evaluation.